All right, we're live. Hey, Mir,
I
how are you?
confused.
Yeah,
Very much confused today. Yeah. New
yeah,
strict measures today for Lombardy. So I'm trying to understand uh, my life basically as I've done during the last weeks. Yeah, if I can move, what I can do. But at this point, basically, I cannot. I cannot move.
yeah.
Only,
Can you walk me through that? One of
yeah.
the interesting things is I see sort of the same thing happening throughout Europe, and Italy is kind of it's like speaking with someone 2 weeks in the future.
Yeah, we are ahead. We are totally ahead for once, which
Yeah,
is
so
very.
can you talk me through sort of how were the last couple of weeks in Italy? How did it
Yeah.
how did it explode so badly there, and how did you
Yeah.
get to where you are?
So it's incredible because it seems like 1 year probably at this point. Everything started in Italy around the 21st of February. I was in the USA, so I was watching the news from there, and I was immediately very concerned about. So what happened? We started to have some cases, and it was clear there were some clusters in Italy. We had some cases before, but two, three. But at the point, it was just like, this is not something that we have imported. We don't understand what's going on. So the first reaction has been from Italy, just put on lockdown 10 towns with very strict measures. But everybody
Be,
was just like, okay.
be, I think in Italy it's not clear who like patient zero even was, right? Like how
No,
the
no, absolutely, still not clear. And the more news I get is just like it's impossible because probably our patient one um, is being it's clear now that it's probably the infection was older than or only coming from patient index of 0. So it was circulating since some weeks. And also that poor guy, it was very hyperactive. So he went to run a race. He went to a meeting, stayed all the time with his family and friends, and also he went to the ER 3 times. So of course, the contagion started from the hospital. It was super clear to me that the situation wasn't in control at all. Especially, this is very stupid to say, but for me, the area where everything started in Italy was just like we call that place something like a place in the middle of nowhere. So if something like that was there, it was obvious that the virus was already circulating in all Italy and probably in all Europe and the USA, because it's a very small town. It was just like Milan. Of course, you expect something like that in Milan. It's more normal.
yeah.
But yeah,
So the first known case was this marathon runner you
yeah,
mentioned,
yeah,
and he's
yeah,
like
yeah.
a 38-year-old
Yeah,
guy,
super
fit,
healthy,
healthy.
sporty. Yeah, yeah.
And how's he
He's
doing now? What's the case with him?
right now is almost out of the hospital. Probably it was kind of lucky because it was the first one. It was just like a symbol. Is still a symbol of everything. So also his wife is about to have a baby in some weeks, but unfortunately his father died yesterday. So yes, there are not only good news for him too,
From
and
Corona or?
for Corona, yes.
Yeah.
I remember many news about the parents scared for the son being in hospital. They got tested because Italy started to testing, of course, people around that area or people in contact with people who already got positive. And unfortunately, passed yesterday was 62 or something like that. So not so old. Yeah.
Yeah. So at first 10 towns went on lockdown,
Yeah.
and then what happened?
Then what happened? Everybody was just like, okay, this is something happening there. We are free to go, especially because the Italian authorities told us to live freely our life. It's not just like everything is under control. It's just like they promoted with the campaign like Milano doesn't stop, Milano non si ferma. and also in other cities, saying just like, we cannot stop our life, we cannot stop our way of living, we cannot stop our economy, just go there, go everywhere. And people believe that, of course, everything was fine. And the majority of cases and majority of the spread happening there during the last weeks of February and during the 1st of March, before the next lockdown. The first lockdown was only for Lombardy and other smaller regions and area in Italy. But after today, the lockdown was for all Italy. It was something that really surprised me, because I was just like, okay, I was expecting something in Lombardy, but all Italy sounded a little bit extreme at the moment. But yes, they decided to do so, and they decided to do during, I mean, they created probably more damages, because the news leaked some hours before, so people had the time to come back to their places, because many people that are living and working in Milan actually live as are not live, they live here, but they are from other region of Italy, especially of the south. So they came back to their families. It was a human and totally normal reaction. But what happened was that the trains and the planes were full of people, and the virus once again spread. It was very, it was terrible to watch, because they are kind of spread the virus in other area of Italy.
What was the situation like in Lombardy at that point, in the hospitals? Were the intensive cares already being overrun when the lockdown happened, or did they?
It was already very much clear that things were very bad at that moment. I have to say that my perception was a little bit probably clear, because I have a cousin who works as an anesthetist in ICU in Milan, in an hospital in Milan. So I could ask him directly what was going on. So the point is that I asked him a lot of questions yesterday too. It's not that they are already collapsed, but every day is harder, because just like they are creating new beds, they are creating new area, hiring new people, but at some point it's not scalable anymore. You cannot go like that. So also the idea that the situation in the hospital is very critical, and also Italians are bad people, but actually is the contrary. The healthcare in Lombardy is, we can say, there is a heroic model, very Catholic. We tend to cure everyone. We want to cure everyone, but the consequences in the medium term and in long term are terrible, because if you cure everyone, you don't have beds anymore. But the most dangerous part is, and it's happening right now, 12% of the people working at the hospital is already positive. So at this point, the problem is, even if we have beds or we have equipment, there is probably less of the staff that can really help the patients. And this is not, I mean, it's very natural for us to do something like that, but the criteria for triage are necessary. It's not something that you can avoid at this point. You have to choose between someone who have more chance than others.
Do you know what these criteria are at the moment, more or less?
Actually, for what I know right now, those are not even applied yet, but the idea is just like if you have more comorbidities, I cannot say that, if you have more comorbidities, and if you are older than probably 65 or something like that, at some points you won't be cured anymore. Those are the ideas, but still they are trying to save everyone, but many deaths happen at home right now. Many happens waiting for an ambulance. Many happen in the ambulances. So I read an article, only 12% or 13% now can reach an ICU and die there. So it's impressive the amount of people that are dying elsewhere also.
Right.
It's inevitable because right now, if you ask for an ambulance and you live in Bergamo, you have to wait for 7 hours at least. So, and it's probably too late. It's probably too late at some point. So there are criteria for the triage, but of course, natural deaths are happening elsewhere too.
Yeah, I've also heard of people dying at home and just the family members having to deal with that for days. Is that true? Have you heard of this?
No, well, I have to say I watched that video of a guy from Naples, and I was just like sure that he was in good faith. But at the beginning I was skeptical. His sister was dying for coronavirus, but actually apparently it is true. I would say that something like that is not happening very often. Luckily, especially here in the north, because the majority of the hospital and everything is here, even if the rest of Italy has not such a giant emergency, but it's just like 80% of the hospitals and everything are here. So if something like that would happen and is starting to happen in the south of Italy, the situation could be like that for many, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw you mention on Twitter the other day that at least it seems that the exponential growth in cases and all of it is at least sort of declining. So it's still, the number is still growing, but there's a decline in the exponential growth. So that is there, do you expect a peak soon, or what is the expectation about that?
So I'm not an expert in anything, but the only thing I could do during the last month, because I started looking at the situation at the beginning of February, actually, after I read the paper by Taleb. I mean, you have to understand what's going on at some point. And the fact that the cases are not increasing exponentially is almost a good news. And also the fact that people don't understand what a lag means. They are just calculating Italy is on a lockdown since the 9th of March. So we are going to expect in 14 days something better happening. But actually there is a giant lag in every single step. So from my calculation, we should see something more positive around the beginning of April, eventually, because this is kind of the first time that we are trying this measure, just like lockdowns. So we still don't know what will happen, but I mean, people is just like, oh my God, so many deaths and everything. It's tragic. I don't want to downplay that, but if you look at the numbers, if the numbers are something we can look at, because there is also this to consider. I don't consider the positive numbers being given from Italy something reliable. This is from my direct experience, and also because I asked in the beginning, there were only tested people in some way linked to the first cases. So, and then they started testing almost everyone. And at that point, we were just like, hey, great, Italy is testing a lot. But right now, the situation is again different. They are only testing people with very severe symptoms, which means that there are so many cases that are not being tested right now. I know at least 2-3 families with a member being tested positive. They have not been tested and they are not in the statistics. And also speaking about the lag about the new cases, a cousin of mine have been tested twice as negative, and in the last weeks, and yesterday was tested as positive, so he entered in the statistic of tomorrow. But he was sick probably from the beginning of March. So there are many problems going on. Also about the death, I would say that the number of deaths is something you cannot fake in Italy. So those data can be more reliable, but still there are problems because of the standardization between countries. If you look at in comparison to the numbers given by Germany, it's just like nothing is going on in Germany. And Italy is just like a giant tragedy. Those are, I think, the opposite cases. In Germany, you enter only if you are dead for coronavirus and coronavirus only. In Italy, you enter even if you have a car accident and then you tested as positive as coronavirus and you enter in the statistics. So it's just like we are having a number incredibly higher, and this is scary. And also, so this is also linked to the capacity of testing. Not many people are being tested right now, 200,000, which seems like a large number, but it's not in comparison to the population of Italy. And I was looking before something I found almost funny. If you look at the statistics of San Marino, which is a very small state inside Italy, the cases per capita are just like crazy. They have the highest number all over the world because they are probably have the same criteria for that as Italy, but the population is very, very small. They are not testing enough, so it's just like they have 4,000 cases per capita. So it's crazy, but of course San Marino is inside Italy, so share many of the characteristics of Italy, but it's also very small, so could be the perfect place to test all the population and probably gain more knowledge, the same as Volgano, the second town was put in lockdown in Italy. It's very interesting what happened there. Actually, it's a case study. The town is a giant, not giant because they are only 3,000 people, but is the perfect case study. Everybody has been tested, and we gained a lot of knowledge from the case of Volgano.
Yeah. So what kind of, if you translate, it's called Volgano?
Volgano.
So if you translate that to the rest of Italy, what would that mean?
Well, probably mean that the number of asymptomatic is so high. It's just like something in between 50%, 75% of all cases. So people were just like totally okay, but it tested as positive.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, which is really crazy. And also it could be a proof that a very strict and extreme lockdown can work because they didn't have any more cases after the lockdown. So
yeah, so you went in lockdown 2 weeks ago, right? In
Lombardy, yes, around
about 2 weeks.
Yeah, about 9. Yeah, it was 9 of March, around that. Yes.
Yeah,
But I was already in self-quarantine since I came back from the US. So at the end of February, 29th of February. Yeah.
So the lockdown in Italy, I think, is quite strict. Like you need a permit to walk the street even. So how does this work? How do you get a permit? How do you get permission? Like what kind of things do you get permission for?
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand from people outside Italy because the idea is just like now we all have a lockdown, but this is an extreme lockdown. This is something in between China and other countries because at this point we need a serious reason to walk, and the reasons are only to get food or to get drugs or to help somebody or for medical reasons.
So hang on, even if you want to go to the grocery store, you need to have a permit. So
yes.
how do you get a permit for that, and who signs it, or how?
Actually, it's very, very easy. It's just like a piece of paper, so stupid a paper in this situation, of course. And you just fill the form and you declare some stuff, where you live, what are you going to do. And they are going to check, in some cases, if, for example, I have a friend who had problem with a cat. The cat was not feeling good, so he had to take to the hospital. And in the meanwhile, police stopped him and asked him for the reason. And before letting him go, they called the hospital and asked if it was correct. So you have to fill a form, which is very easy to do. You can also do that at the moment with the police, but it's totally better if you have already provided a lot of information, just like the receipt if you came back from a shop, or just announce that you are going to arrive to another place, and they are going to check. They can check if your declaration is correct even later. The point is almost funny as a situation, because it's so stupid, but the point is the consequences are criminal law. So if something you write is not correct, this is a startup process. It will last for probably a month after that. And if you pay the fine, which is not a fine, is something different from a fine, but there is not a correspondence in English, so it's just called ammenda. If you pay the ammenda, which right now is only 200 euros, it's just like saying I'm guilty. And you start a process, and your criminal record is not clean anymore for all of your life. So it's not something you should take in. So just like, okay, I'm going to pay only 200 euros, who cares? No, the consequences are very hard.
Right. So how do people react to this? Do they agree with the policy? Do people comply?
I have to say I'm still shocked, because I was imagining people, I mean, those are very extreme measures. We cannot move anymore. And for example, from yesterday in Lombard, there are stricter measures. Once again, we could get some sports outside, alone, but right now we can't anymore. I think this is also against our health. This is incredible. I don't know. And at the beginning, people were just like, oh my God, this is new, what I'm going to do. And then their opinion radicalized every day more. So right now they were happy, really happy for new strict measure, just like you cannot move anymore. And probably they are going to reduce also the hours we can get food at the shops or public transportation. So at this point, I don't know what to expect. I mean, it just like it's very dystopian, but I have to say, I'm not able, even if the most of my day is now spent looking at the news and understanding those decrees, I'm not able to understand what the next moves will be. So stupid stuff, but they're talking now about essential food and essential items. So I can imagine that in the next weeks, probably only some kind of foods or only some kind of items will be considered. This is what I can see from now. But
I can only assume that in Italy, that would be pizza.
yeah, absolutely. But there's an emergency in Rome. You're not supposed to cook a margherita anymore, because I don't remember exactly the point, but was just you can, because the mozzarella, I don't remember. But in Rome there is a margherita emergency, not in Milan.
You cannot make a pizza margherita in parts of Italy right now.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Check in Rome, not
right.
not in a small area, in Rome. Yes, I don't remember, because it's just like my mind at this point is just like refusing all these nonsense stuff.
Yeah.
like cannot contain.
I also read about, or maybe you tweeted it, but about GPS tracking starting
Yeah,
to go on with phones.
yeah, they started. So once again, it was almost funny because it was just like, we are controlling and surveilling you, so we know that you moved, please stop, otherwise we are going to impose a stricter measure. And of course they wanted to do even without this menace, but yes, they started check it, and it was like just like 40% moved, more than 50 meters, because they checked the distance, the change in the cell towers. That's the only thing they can do right now. Of course, they could have done that before, but they're using that against us and to check us. So it's not a good news at all. Even if it was almost funny, the idea that he was trying to menace us not to move. And also, if you have to go to the shop, you move. Many they have to move more than 500 meters, and also many people are still working, the people at the grocery store, the people at the hospital. There's a big part of the population that have to provide the essential needs for everybody else. And the point is, people are going crazy. I just read that a poor pharmacist I don't know how to explain, but somebody threw water from the balcony and insult that poor pharmacist. Because right now people is very hungry and I want to find the scapegoats. And the scapegoats maybe are just heroes. They are still working for all of us, which is very scary totally.
Wait, the pharmacist was considered to be doing something wrong? Or did I
Yeah,
misunderstand you?
the point is, the people from the balcony don't know don't know anything about the people who working in the street, but they assume they are not they are people just walking because they want to walk. That person was walking to go to the pharmacy or come back from the pharmacy because she was a worker. But fear and anxiety make people find the scapegoats and enemy everywhere. This is the situation right now. I wasn't
Right.
expecting something like that, but they are scared. They are screaming from the balconies, you are killing elderly, or things like that. It's just the new reality.
Right, just for walking over on the street, even though she had a good reason. That's crazy.
Absolutely. And everyone is just like, we have to close everything. Oh, great. If you close everything, you're not supposed to have anything, which means no food, no drugs. And even about, I was thinking yesterday about garbage and trash. What about that? Or many services, if nobody is going to produce food or medical equipment or everything. They want to shut down everything. They don't understand what this means.
So in the Netherlands, the official strategy is this herd immunity strategy, where they're basically, the government's basically saying we want 60% of the population to get this virus, and then we'll sort of try to protect the elderly and the weak somehow. I'll leave my comments about this policy out of this video, but do you think the same thing is going on in Italy, or is there some other sort of strategy, or how do you see this?
I have to say that we don't know anything at this point. So maybe it could be better to try different strategies. And for many people, herd immunity could seem very extreme and terrible, but we don't know if in the long run, maybe it's even better, because we are, of course, counting the death of people dying right now, but the indirect death are going to be a huge toll for Italy too. I mean, many people are won't have their jobs anymore. They're going to be a very critical economical situation. There are many people in the hospitals right now. They are dying because they were only staff working there. Also, I would expect that at some point, if we stay in this lockdown for month, I don't know, at this point, people we have some sort of health emergencies, just like I mean, they can lose their sanity. It's not something we are used to do.
What is the government communicating at this point? Are they communicating any sort of long-term or mid-term strategy, or are they just saying by day what the policy is going to be today and this week?
No, yeah, they are just communicated the number of deaths every day at 6 p.m. And after that, every 2-3 days, there are some updates, but there are almost the same. Just like yesterday, Conte spoke on a live and asking, it's just like rhetorics. And I know there is going to be a new decree in some hours, and because he spoke about talk about only essential needs, only essential activities once again, but of course there is going to be some limitation, still not clear. So my perception is that they are waiting for the reaction of people, and every time they try to remodulate and balancing everything on how people will react to that, because it's very strange. He talk about that, and then the decree is out in almost 1 day after. So
yeah, you mentioned earlier in this interview that the only things open right now are like grocery stores and drugstores. How much more essential than that can it get?
well, the point is that there are giant supermarkets. They are still trying to sell things just like underpants or stationery, but those are not considered essential items. So those parts of the supermarkets are just closed. You cannot get underpants. And yesterday, Amazon.com told us that they are not going to deliver many items in Italy and France. So we cannot get pencil, for example, on Amazon, and not even the supermarket. So yeah, this is starting to be concerning. I mean, it's not so terrible, but I can say that underpants probably are something we want to buy at some point. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. To close this off, what do you see any role for Bitcoin in this whole crazy situation in Italy, around the world?
Well, I have to say that that's what keeps me sane at the moment. In every crisis, there are opportunities, and there are. So in this case, probably Bitcoin can prove itself and can really be considered a safe haven. I really hope. The point is are people already understood that Bitcoin is so powerful? I don't know if we have communicated that in the right way, but if situation get worse, it's the reality will do the work. And also, as Bitcoiners right now, we can test our conviction, we can test our faith in Bitcoin as hodler, for example, and there's a big opportunity for us staying at home, for example, in Italy, and to finally do something for Bitcoin. And I was I had this talk at a confiscatable in Las Vegas before coronavirus, so it was very different everything. But the main point was just like we are not probably considering many areas in which we can help Bitcoin. And for example, one of the first that I would consider is the testing. Is the perfect moment to test Bitcoin tools, to test wallets, and you don't need anything else. You just need to start using that and tell people who develop those tools what is wrong, what is working, what we can do to help Bitcoin. I think that could be very, very important as a feedback, and not many people are doing that right now. So I will start for myself doing that and giving feedbacks.
All right. Well, thanks, Mir. I thought it was very interesting. I'm expecting to be on lockdown myself within a couple of days. I'm already staying inside most of the time.
Yeah, it's not so different for an order. And the first days are almost funny, but at some point you will start to feel the inconvenience and the discomforts of the situation, because everything else is not working anymore. So I cannot get my online groceries, I cannot get my deliveries as in the past, I don't have a cleaning lady anymore. So those are discomforts at this point. So we say after 20 days, more than 20 days, I could call that a discomfort. I cannot have my favorite brands of food or stuff anymore. Those are only discomfort, but I have to say I'm really concerned at this point. I'm really concerned because those are emergency measure, but it's very difficult that they are not going to keep those measures ad libitum and in the future. And people are okay now, but they don't see in the long run which what this means, and it's scary.
Yeah.
Basically now I cannot move with any kind of transportation, not even outside Italy, not even in my area. I cannot move from my home.
Do you have any last minute tips while I can still walk the street for like one more day or something?
Well, I have to say, many people are asking me for tips in direct messages because they are scared and they want to know what to buy. It's just like you get used to the situation. It's not so terrible, and I'm very lucky because I'm with Giacomo and my daughter, and I'm more concerned for people who are alone in this situation. Because at some point you really need some social contacts, and you cannot have a walk, you cannot see other people, it will start to be very difficult. So probably this is what I'm missing the most about items or other things. Just being reasonable. We are still have food. It's very difficult to get online. It's very difficult to get on the shop because you have to do very long lines, but still this is not an emergency. It's just like how impact our everyday life.
All right. Well, Mir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay strong.
Thank you.
And one day I'll see you again somewhere.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that day.
All right.
Sharon.
Ciao.